In this video, we are going to be taking a look at HTML forms. HTML forms are basically used to collect information from the users. For example, login information, comments, emails, file uploads, etc. In order to create a form in HTML, you are going to need to use the form tag. The form tag takes in two attributes, the action and the method. The action is basically the link to your database or to the file that's going to be used to process the data that's going to be submitted in the form. For now, I'm just going to put in a hashtag here. And the other attribute for the form tag is the method. In here, we will just say post because we are going to be using this form to post data instead of fetching data. In order to collect information about our users, we are going to need to use the input tag. The input tag takes in the attribute type, and in here I'm just going to say text because this first input field is going to be for our username. So for the name, I'm going to say username, and I'm going to close that and save. As you can see, our input field is rendered here and there's nothing inside it. To put something inside it to guide the user, we can place a placeholder here. So I'll say placeholder, enter username and save. And as you can see, we now have a placeholder within our input field here. The input tag is often used with a label to provide a label for the user to know what the input field is supposed to contain. So here I'll say label and I'll say for. Inside the for, I'm going to need to put in the ID of our input field. So I'm going to go back to our input field here and say ID and then say username. And here in our label tag, I'm going to say for username because that's the ID of our input here. And I'm going to close that. And within this element here, I'm going to say username. And as you can see, this will appear like that. So this is basically a complete input field for our username. The next input type you are going to need to know is for the user's email. So what I'll do is I'll say label and then I'll say for email. And in here, I'll say email. And then I'll say input type email. Please notice that in the type here, I'm going to be using email instead of text. This is important because the text field will allow any type of input, but the email field will only allow emails to be inputted into it. So for the name, I'm going to say email. And for the placeholder, I'm going to say enter email. And finally, for the ID, I'm going to say email. And our input field for our email will appear like this. Another input type is the password. So for that, I'm going to say label and I'm going to say password. And then I'm going to say input type password. If you want to take the password of a user on your website, you have to use this input type instead of email or text. For the name, I'm also going to say password. And the placeholder, I'm going to say enter password. And for ID, I'm also going to say password and close this up. As you can see, our password field will be rendered like this. One thing that this password input does is that when I input text into our field here, you can see that it is hidden. In order to submit our form data, we are going to use another type of input, which is submit. So I'm going to say input type and then submit and then close this and save. And this will render a button here to submit our form. I can click on enter to submit our form. HTML offers form validation by default. So let's say all these fields were required and I didn't want the form to allow our users to submit the form with empty fields here. I was going to use the required attribute. So I'll go up here and say required. Now, when I try to submit our form here, you'll see that it will need me to input data into our form here. And also, you'll notice that if I input an email that is not in the correct email format, it's not going to allow me to submit the form. So for your emails, use the type email. Don't use the type text. Another attribute that is available for all input types is the Maxlength attribute. Let's say our password needs a maximum of 15 characters. I was going to go here and say max length is equals to 15 and save. And as you can see, if I try to input more than 15 characters here, it's not gonna allow me to. Also, I can determine the minimum length of a password using the Minlength attribute, and I'm gonna set that to 6 so that when I input like 2 characters and try to submit, you will see that it will tell me to input more characters in here. So this is how you do form validation in HTML. The next 2 input types I want to show you is the date and also the file. So in here I can say input type date, and this will basically allow the users to select a date using this date picker here. Another input type is the file. So let's say I wanted the user to upload their profile. What I do is I'd say label for, let's say profile, and then let's say profile picture, and then below this I'm gonna say input type file and save. And basically what this will do, it will allow my users to pick a file for our profile picture. Yeah. As you can see, our form is now looking good. We have our username, our email, our password, our date, and our profile picture here. But let's say we wanted our users to be able to pick their gender on our website. What I'm going to do is I'm going to need to use the radio input type. So here's how to use that. For the gender of our user, I'm going to say label for, and let's say male, and close that, and then let's say male. Yeah. Let me try to erase the top part of our form here so that it doesn't interfere with what I'm doing now. Okay, once I have my label, I'm going to say input type and then radio. Yeah. For the radio tag, I also need the value, which is going to be male, and this is also going to need an ID, which is going to be male to match our 4 attribute in our label here. And the last thing we're going to need is the name, which is going to be gender here. And I'm going to close this and save. And as you can see, our radio button is rendered on our screen there. In order to allow female users to pick their gender, I'm going to copy this and paste it. For our label here, I'm going to say female. I'm going to change this to female, and then change this also to female. And our value is also going to be female. Our ID, female also. And I'm going to keep the name here the same so that our browser knows that these 2 input fields are for our gender here. So when I save, you'll see that both our radio buttons are rendered here. And if I select one, the other is deselected. So I cannot select both at the same time. This is because of the name gender here. So if I was to remove this and save, you'll see that I'm now able to select them both. So please make sure that they have the same name here. So our user can select either male or female. Okay, another input type is checkboxes. So let's say we wanted our users to be able to pick a career path for themselves on our site. For our careers, I'm going to say label for, and then CS, and then within our label here, I'm going to say computer sciences. And for our input, I'm going to say input type checkbox, and the value is going to be CS, the ID is going to be CS as well, and the name is going to be career. And as you can see, our checkbox for computer sciences is added here. In order to add more checkboxes, I'll just duplicate this multiple times, and I'm going to need to change all our texts here in order to include other careers. And as you can see, our checkboxes for our career paths here are added. You can style this to look beautiful using CSS, and I'll show you how to do that in the next part of this course. For now, I am going to try to show you 2 more tags for your HTML forms. So I'm going to erase this so that the next part is clear. If I write an input type text here and then close it and save, you'll see that our input tag here has a single line. So if I input text here and press enter, it's gonna submit my form. In order to get multiple lines here, what I'll need to do is use the text area tag like this. Basically, this one will allow me to input as much text as I want here, and I can press enter to go to the next line. Of course, I still need to put my label here so that our user understand what this input field is for. So I'll say label for, let's say, comments, and in here I'm gonna say comment, because the for attribute of our label here is comments. I'm going to need to go into the opening tag of our text area tag here and say ID comment, and as you can see, our text area will appear like this. Let me try to style it to make it full screen. I'll say styles and then width 100% and save, and that will make it appear like this. I can resize it and I can add as much text as I want inside our text area here. For a drop down menu, I can use the select tag here. Within the select tag, I'm going to use the option tag to define our options, and here I'm going to say option 1, and I'm going to duplicate this multiple times to define our other options. And I'm going to save this, and as you can see, our drop down menu is defined here. Also, we need a value here for each and every one of our options here. So here I'll say option 1, and then option 2, and then option 3, 4, 5, and 6. The value attribute in our options here is required because when I pick an option here, this is the value that is going to be sent to the database, not the text in here. So basically, this is how to create forms in HTML. Hopefully, I've showed you all the inputs you are going to need for each and every type of information that you are going to need to collect from your users. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.